Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast, where it's our goal to help you become the best financial advisor possible and drive the positive evolution of financial advice. G'day, Clayton here. Had a really good conversation with Dave Carney. Got to know Dave in Cebu at his annual conference at the Virtual Business Partners Conference. Former advisor, then went on to teach a bunch of other advisors, and some of the most successful advisors I know were taught by him on how to become better at advice. I mean, he's just built a 400 plus strong staff company with a business partner over in the Philippines. Mind-blowing, really, when you're walking up and down escalators, and it took a while to get my head around, but had some really good insights, some of the best insights I've heard for people that are in and around financial advice. So I wanted to get it on tape, on record, on digital mediums, all that kind of jazz, and get it out there. So hopefully you enjoy. This episode is proudly sponsored by FE Analytics. Now, a number of XY advisors have already discovered this one-stop, easy-to-use tool that helps with investment research, analysis, portfolio construction, ongoing monitoring, and client reporting. Find out how FE Analytics can help you improve your business process, manage your existing client base, and win new business by contacting Bruce Jenner via bruce.jenner, Jenner, at financialexpress.net, or visit financialexpress.net for more information. G'day. How's it going? What do you know? Striker like Clayton here from XY Advisor, and today we are having a conversation with Dave Carney here from VBP, who I got to actually spend a bit of time with over in the Philippines, Cebu, at the annual conference, and really sort of start getting my head around what it means to outsource and, you know, the advantages, I guess, of using an outsourcing environment that's set up for Australian financial services rather than just generic outsourcing. And then during that time that I got to spend with Dave, I found out, you know, the background used to be an advisor, then an advisor coach. And I listened to you speak and I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if we could get you on a podcast? So here we are today, mate. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. No, feel privileged. Appreciate you giving me, you know, time to talk and all that sort of thing. It's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Oh man, pleasure. So let's kick it off. Like, when did you get into advice, and how did you get into advice? And you know, what's your background?
Yeah. So coming up on 25 years, I guess, in the advice game. But you know, I go back early 90s. I actually was working for a little fledgling bank, or the State Bank of New South Wales in those days, and they had this arm of the bank called First State Financial Services. And that sort of sparked my interest in sort of the funds management. They had a thing called the imputation fund back then, which was one of the stellar sort of performers. And I'd gone overseas to England for a while, you know, do the sort of normal sort of backpacking type thing, come back sort of mid-20s and decided to get into financial services, you know, because that had sparked my interest. So obviously Colonial bought out First State, and then Commonwealth Bank bought them out, and, you know, so First State Financial, that's where it all came from originally, but that was sort of my background. Worked in, you know, pretty much sort of 20 years as an advisor. You know, started in the banks, worked through, had my own sort of, you know, practice in Balmain in Sydney, had my own license, you know, for a fair part of that time. And then, you know, sort of, I guess, took an opportunity, you know, saw that my passion really was around business. And I'd worked with a lot of sort of accounting referrals. I had a lot of business clients as you know, or business owners as clients. And I was just really interested in, you know, what really drove business, what really differentiated, and what sort of difference could we make, you know, as advisors, you know, in that space with business owners. And I still think there's a long way for us to go. But that was sort of an area that, you know, really, you know, led my passion.
Yeah, right. And how come, I guess, it's the question that, you know, you meet a lot of, and I'm a former advisor and I sold my practice. What was it? And I'll tell you why I kind of one of my main drivers, and I actually did an article about this in the IFA magazine when I originally sold the company, and it was I sold my company because I was really frustrated with compliance not being tailored around delivering a better client outcome, but it was just simply about how, licensees could still funnel advisors down the paths that they wanted, but they could just tick enough boxes so that there was technically no contraventions of any regulations. And that really frustrated me. It just seemed like I was spending an awful lot amount of time making other people look good rather than the best outcome for my clients. So that really irritated me. Why did you sell your company?
Look, there was a couple of reasons, but my wife, personal reasons was my wife actually got cancer after our daughter was born, and I was sort of working that typical long hours, just sort of trying to grow a business in my mid-30s, having good success, but really came to that realization that where was I going, what was happening, and so I actually took an opportunity and sold half the business at that stage. And I had no idea before then that you could actually package up and sell, a book of business and but they were sort of what we call, my non-ideal clients, not necessarily the smallest clients, but this was something that I'd gone through the training with Jim Stackpool back in the mid-2000s and put me onto this idea of new company, old company, your legacy sort of stuff. So I did that. But at the time, with that, and then that sort of, I guess, sparked me to sort of look at, well, okay, where do I really want to add the value? What's sort of looking at doing? And I remember being in the boardroom of my office with clients, and a lot of these were either retired business owners or successful business owners, in their 50s or so, talking about, planning, retirement, these sorts of things. But I would use that as an opportunity to really try to understand what made, these people successful. And there was two groups. Essentially, there was a group of people that were successful financially, but also ticked all the other boxes of, what we would really say, it had come, they had a really fulfilled lives. And they were a much smaller group than a lot of the other people who we would all say from a financial metric were successful, but it seemed to have come at a cost. And that was either the relationship with their children, broken down marriages, lack of interest, health issues, these sorts of things. And I was just really intrigued at what set the difference apart. And it's not rocket science, and it's probably something people have all heard. It was just that sense of those that were really successful but kept a lot of the balance. They just worked smarter, not harder. It was obvious that they were surrounded themselves, and that, saying of worked on the business, not in the business, those sorts of things. But they were just, it was very obvious to me that was what they were about. And that became a real passion of, well, how do you sort of help those sorts of things? And I looked at myself and thought I was probably in the other camp. I was just trying to work harder, but not work smarter. And so that led me to sort of, I suppose a passion of sort of, more wanting to work with business and on business and those sorts of things. And essentially that's then, why I sold the business. And I had an opportunity that was a roll up with an accounting firm that I'd worked closely with that was selling. So I took the opportunity and as they say, sort of went on a different path.
And then, so I guess going to Jim Stackpool, you've got a bunch of, training under your belt. You then decide to go into actually helping other advisors grow their companies.
Yeah, look, I didn't start out that way because I was very conscious that, one day you're an advisor, next day you're, sort of trying to tell people, what to, do. And I was going, how do I, that's not sort of where I want to be. But I sort of looked around. I did some training. I worked with I did a bunch of training with a firm called Sherlaws, which had done a lot of work back in the 90s, early 2000s. So learn a lot of the sort of EQ type stuff, context of things. And then, I actually, found a group, which are called Gazelles, a guy by the name of Vern Harnish, who wrote a book called The Rockefeller Habits, and now has a best-selling book called Scaling Up. And so I went over to the States and did a bunch of, certification and training to become a Gazelles coach. And, I then started, just working with a whole bunch of different businesses. So it could be service businesses, accounting firms. I was working with one of the larger hire companies in Australia, and various different things. But as much as some of the frameworks and the way you apply sort of the business of business, is applicable across, doesn't matter, any type of business. My strengths in retail or manufacturing or those sorts of things, weren't so good. What I did understand was service business. So I had, friends or colleagues that say, look, can you run us a strategy day? Can you help us with the sales team, with the advisors, and, can you do this sort of thing? And before I knew it, I guess I just realized that there was some knowledge in addition to just the business coaching that you could apply. So I just started to specialize in financial services.
Cool. What would you say is the hallmark of a success? If you could say like one thing, this is what all successful financial planners have in common.
Mindset. And what I mean by that is they're very clear on the mindset. So, and there's two paths to this, and I often refer to it. It's are you an advisor that owns a financial planning business, or are you a business owner in the advice game? Yep. And the mindset you choose really will determine a lot of the factors and decisions and how you go about sort of things. And what I see is when people try to be a little bit of both, and they're so, if you're really, if your passion is really about the advice and the client relationships and those sorts of things, absolutely own that, build a business around that, and understand, what the strengths and weaknesses of that type of strategy is. But you can be a very good, profitable type business in that area. The other option is if you're seeing yourself more as a business owner, where you're going to invest more is in the development of people and talent and systems and processes, probably to make something more scalable. And I think the challenge with boutique type smaller businesses today is all the level of compliance and level of complexity that we're having that's making, that harder just to really be at, the small end. And I think we're going to see the emergence of more sort of, firms, not licenses, but firms that are sort of, got 15, 20 partners, advisors, general manager or managing director, proper, that sort of structure, maybe similar to what we'd seen in mid-tier sort of accounting. But I think being clear on the mindset, that helps to make, the critical decisions and where you invest your time, your energy, those sorts of things.
So we got introduced through Roxy, Andrew Rock, and one of the coolest things that I loved about the Announcer Group business was that you'd go into the office and you would see everyone's personality traits and everyone's, there were insightful pieces on each of the employees. And there was certainly a hum and a buzz that was in the office that just sort of led, you could just feel that people were turning up very focused on delivering a great outcome for the clients and a great outcome for the business. And I guess you could summarize that as saying it had a really good culture. Now, one of the I guess that's probably the first time I'd ever walked into an office and seen such a specific focus on culture. And Roxy would say to me, Dave Carney had a big part to play in this. And then when I was listening to you talk, you had a lot to say on this culture piece. What can you give advisors a tip on how to deliver great culture in their work environment?
Sure. So let me just there's a couple of things, right? In business, I think there's 4 key areas that you need to get right. It doesn't matter what the business is, etc. And they are people, strategy, the execution of that strategy, and managing cash flow, building up, ensuring that you've got the ability to, build a war chest to take opportunities. So just, those sorts of things. So, in advice businesses, cash has always been pretty good. We don't have to be chasing up, accounts, pay receivables, these sorts of things. We've got, that had been a fairly, strong part of the business model. But when I look at it and I go, it doesn't really matter whether what type of business. At the end of the day, if you could only choose one thing to focus on, it's always going to, it's wherever the biggest drama is, but also the biggest opportunity. It's around people, right? Because you get the right people, they'll help you with the strategy. They'll give you the discipline around execution. And the thing about the culture side of it is that it's all about managing discretionary effort, right? So every day, any employee, that discretionary effort is, if they really are doing, the minimum to keep their job, or do they really care and they really invested in what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to do? That's that discretionary effort. And you get good, talented people, give them an environment where they really feel like they can, add, and they'll give you lots of the discretionary effort. So that then turns up, meaning that, people feel connected, they feel committed, those sorts of things. But you get results, right? And you only have to look at. I when I talk with some of my staff, I run them through, an induction, where we always talk about, the importance of what is a culture-led business, because we talk about being a culture-led business at Virtual Business Partners, and that's certainly what Announce Awards as a business, is culture-led, and the importance that we talk about there is that we go is culture happens whether you design it or not, right? So we've all worked in an organization where the culture may not be the ones that the owners or the founders or the executives think it is, right? So, because they might have said, here's some values and this is sort of what we stand for, but there's no real commitment to live it every day. And so what happens is you end up with a culture that isn't the one that you really want. So we're like, well, why not design a culture that you love, and why not sort of really push, energy into that sort of thing? So for us, so if you look at it, it's all about people, getting the right people, and then giving them, an environment for them to flourish.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And the important thing with culture, it doesn't matter what culture, it's your culture to design and be clear on, but it's about being then really committed to living it. And so if you're going to violate things, and one day, say this is what we stand for, but then, allow things, to occur that sort of, is contrary to that, then, that's when, you'll be judged, and when, you'll be find it difficult to sort of sustain the culture.
Yeah, I guess it's like a lot of things, isn't it? It's freedom within boundaries, but just being really clear on what it is you stand for and what it is that you don't stand for. And then that just compounded over a long period of time. Yeah, kind of sets a set of spoken rules, which then I guess translate into unspoken rules, which I guess another name is for culture.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and if you look at the S&P 500, you look at the top places to work. I've got this slide there that shows the performance of the best places to work. You get a 10 times return relative to the average benchmark. So the great places to work not only have a good environment, but are actually, creating great results. And so the days of having a leadership style which is very command and control is not necessarily, now, that if you're in the army, that's what you want, right? Because the results are people die, we're going into battle, we need discipline, that sort of thing. That is absolutely the right culture when you're in the defence forces, right? So that culture, very clear on it. And I think Simon Sinek talks about, the idea of leaders eat last, which is a great book that, I've read and, absorbed and, all those sorts of, but he talks about that's the discipline through the Marines in the US that, the leaders are not there to, they're there to sort of, when it matters, they'll go last as far as, if there's not enough, that sort of environment. So that's, the culture is ideal. And then I look at the environments that, we work in, we need people, it's a knowledge, we're transferring knowledge. We want people to be engaged. We need people to really care about clients. And so, where I think it's so important that we really have that great client relationship, well, we've got to make sure that we have great culture and we care about the staff because they're the ones at the end of the day that's going to transfer that sort of feeling across to, across to clients.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I guess, turning up in sort of the level of the multiple levels, which I was joking about with everyone, the multiple levels of shopping center, that you've sort of just taken over there in Cebu as the company gets growing, and then so focused on culture. What's really interesting is, you can say these words, but then to watch it play out and to turn into this multiple hundred employee, multiple story shopping center office, it's really surreal. Like, I wasn't expecting to see that level of in just organization and that level of people working together in such a cohesive manner, because it seems pretty crazy for a couple of Aussie guys to sort of set up a company and then fast forward a handful of years and then you've got this behemoth. And then I guess what's really struck a chord with me is watching sort of the success that you've had there, and then listening to what you're saying about culture and all these things. It demands sort of a much more authority than just if someone's saying it and they don't have that sort of, large business behind them. So I guess, talking about culture and talking about the people and everything like that, let's talk about outsourcing, because I outsourced a couple of times. I think I mentioned this to you while I was overseas. When I first started looking into outsourcing, I hired someone and they worked from home. And they didn't really know anything about financial planning, let alone Australian laws and financial planning. And then that was quite limited in its success, in that, ultimately I just ended up sort of getting them to do administration tasks. And even then, I was a bit concerned around just, even looking at emails with access and security and things like that. So it didn't last too long, and I sort of had a negative taste in my mouth about it. But then I thought the solution would be to use an agency. So this agency finds good people, right? So, okay, well, so they still work from home, but you pay an agency, and I guess they're the ones that find good people. So we did that for a while, and that was more successful, certainly. And there was certainly... They had more experience in administration tasks, but still, it was still sort of, I guess, I hadn't put the time and effort in, but at the same time, because they were just working from home, they had no frame of reference for what financial planning was, and again, what financial planning in Australia was. So what do you find, I guess, specifically for Australian-based financial planners, what are the main mistakes that you see Australian-based financial planners making when they attempt to outsource?
Look, it's there's probably a couple of elements to that. The easier one is to say what we find is there's a lot of assumed knowledge, right? So just within our businesses where, typically, smaller businesses, maybe, less than 20 staff, those sorts of things. So we don't have, as advice, we don't have training divisions or HR departments that set up, learning and development, those sorts of things. So when someone comes in, a lot of what they have to do is just learn things on the go. And, when we lose a really good staff member, what we realize is we've lost a lot of this knowledge, So, we're big on knowledge capture these days. We're working on a bunch of stuff that, ensures that we can find better ways to sort of capture that knowledge and use technology to be able to search and find that sort of thing. So you don't have that, that knowledge loss. But when it comes to outsourcing, often then there's just that assumed knowledge, and we're constantly amazed at, how, when people are trying to outsource some things that, they don't, they're just not used to sort of building the level of detail that's needed to, maybe help someone sort of understand and get the context of what's happening. So that would probably be, one area. The other is just assuming that, if you're going to use an outsourcing firm that, I guess all are the same, or that they will, there's a lot of, what I see a lot is, a lot of people say they'll be able to look after things and do things, but, how committed are they really to understanding what you do? So for us, we're just specialists. We only do work in financial services. We don't do any other areas. And we really see ourselves as a training organisation. So, that's what we're about, is training people in the skill sets to sort of assist. Now, I would say that if you, when you talk about, outsourcing just to someone home-based, yes, that's going to be the cheapest option.
Yeah.
But, in this regime of, compliance, licensing, all those sorts of things, it's fraught with danger. And not that I, particularly say in the Philippines, and that's really, what I understand. I don't, know other countries, but certainly in the Philippines, I would not be, I'm not concerned about them, doing something crazy with the data. Yeah. But working at home, they don't have the firewalls, they don't have the protections, they don't have the systems in place. They have, internet's pretty lousy, so their efficiencies, so all of those sorts of things are stuff that I would, be concerned about. From when you get to the Privacy Act, there's two parts of the Act you've really got to look at. One is, are you disclosing that you may be using third parties and they may be overseas? Most privacy, most privacy guides today, cover that. And then the second one is, have you taken reasonable steps to protect the data? I don't think with a home base you would probably be able to tick that box, if push came to shove on that one. But if you look at, now again, if you're just getting them to do a logo or update some websites or do some social media or that sort of stuff, no problems. But as soon as you start talking about client data, client information, obviously everything we deal with is private and sensitive.
Yeah.
The next level is, you could look at, where we talk about, outsourcing, or, in some respects you might even call it like insourcing, where you're setting up your own team offshore. And if you're probably going to get to about 20, 25 people, it probably starts to make sense economically, where you may actually go and set up your own company, deal with all of that, and deal with everything to do with it, in somewhere like the Philippines, maybe rent some place, do that sort of stuff. Less than that, then it's sort of the other option is what is called seat leasing. And that's
what is it called, sorry?
Seat leasing. So you're essentially leasing a seat. And that's probably where you see the largest take up at the moment, where companies are sort of like, they've got the facilities, the infrastructure, they'll have a hiring process, and they'll put someone in front of you, etc. And you're essentially leasing that seat, that desk, and you've got that staff member, but you're totally responsible for everything.
Yeah.
And again, depending on, time, commitment, what you're looking at doing, that again is, what we saw was, it's extremely hard. In the, like all of it, in an accounting world, it's easier to find people with accounting qualifications, even though they might need to learn the Australian tax system and that sort of thing. That's probably a quicker transition, where we're often finding people that, are accountants, or, all of our staff are degree qualified, but they, might be in, business degrees or teaching or whatever. But you've really got to start from scratch, teaching the Australian laws, regulations, superannuations, all of those sorts of things. And so, again, it's just depending. It really comes down to what investment of time and energy does the practice want to play. Because, at a seat like, that sort of area, you may be able to, do quite well, but there's going to be a bigger commitment of time and those sorts of things. We just felt that, the key for us is it's about training and developing our people. And then, what we saw is it's all about creating a relationship. So whatever way you look at this, whatever, options you take, it is all about still building a relationship. Right. And so those that just want to hand over tasks, have them done, come back, you're not going to get quite the outcome. We talk a lot about the difference between a customer and a client. And so, if I work in the call center for Telstra, I deal with customers all day. I try to help them, but there's a lot of frustrations. We've all had that type of experience.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's no ongoing relationship. What we teach our guys, it's all about building client relationship, because you're dealing with the same people day in, day out. And when certainly, Filipinos, when they get more confident and they feel like, part of the team and part of, that sort of environment, you're going to get just so much more back, and they're going to be, they're going to be much more likely to challenge something if they don't think it's right.
Which is super valuable, right?
Super valuable, yeah. But culturally, it took me a while to really figure this out. But, what we find is their biggest fear is offending you.
Wow. Yeah, right.
So if they bring something up and maybe you've explained something and they didn't understand it, the natural thing is they don't want to say, "Oh, I don't really understand," because that might offend you.
Yeah, right.
And we go, like, that's the least of our worries. We'd much rather than to go, "Well, hang on, I just didn't quite understand that. Can you just repeat that?" But their fear, that's something that we're always sort of, battling with a little bit. But this, if they're going to, suggest something, they're often concerned. They're often, historically, I suppose, the way that, sort of, being dealt with over the many hundreds of years, in different, whether the Spanish, the US, the Chinese, whoever's controlled, is they're very much there to serve, right? But when they're asked to sort of, come up and have ideas, they may have them, but they probably don't want to suggest something because you might then get offended, So that's where we just break that down and look at that. So, there's some things. Another big tip that I would suggest is dealing, with outsourcing is culturally in the Philippines, yes means yes, yes means no, and yes means maybe. So that's a challenge in itself. So we do some training around that. Like, we talk to our clients, never ask a question that is, closed end. So never say, like, do you understand that? They'll go, yes. right? And again, it's, because, that's yes could be yes, no, or maybe. So what we say is just ask them, just say, look, can you just repeat back exactly what I need you to do? Can you just summarize what your next points are? So you get them to sort of articulate, rather than saying, yes. And again, that's just this cultural thing.
Yeah.
So I think I went a bit off tangent there, but hopefully that sort of.
No, mate. I actually think that was really valuable. So one of the things that I'm noticing about financial advice is that technology, because of so much changes that's happening in the industry, and technology is so difficult, right? Like just tech in itself to build, to update, it's so hard. So one of the things I've noticed is that the net promoter scores for basically all financial planning technology is really low. It's really low, and there's no one that's nailing it. And that's more of a symptom of, as I mentioned, tech being hard to update, and also like there being so many updates. So many updates, legislatively, regulations from licensees, and then it's very hard to update software. So there's this huge lag, and because we've had the Royal Commission, all this stuff, there's all these changes coming in. There's all these additional, requirements, but the tech just is not there to fix the gap. It's just everything's coming back as, I've heard some places say that, in some licensees that compliant advice is below 50%, right? Which is just crazy. So if tech can't solve the problem, or at least is slow to solve the problem, how on earth, and like this is sort of a genuine question, like how on earth can an advisor trust anyone, even themselves, even their tech, even onshore staff, let alone offshore staff, that the advice that's getting produced is actually compliant?
Yeah. That's that's a challenge for us. I mean, we've got over 100 odd people in our advice team. That's not doing the admin, but that's, we've got about, say, 70 or so of those that are, paraplanners,
right.
QA, our own QA team, some managers and some people in training, etc. But that's huge for us because, dealing with different licensees. I think we have about 16, 18 different licensees. So, not only have we got all the different softwares that we sort of have to, deal with.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I think we use Xplan, Coin, Advisor Logic, Midwinter, that's just on the, maybe the plan writing. Then we have numerous ones for CRMs and all that sort of stuff. But then you've got all the licensee standards, and compliance and all those sorts of things. So, that's a, real genuine challenge, and one that we're finding that, we're working closer and closer with some of the licensees to, be really clear on what their standards are, and then, so that we're able to interpret, etc. For us, we made a decision that we, on an advice side, we only work with people where they've got the ability to have a full-time resource. So that means that person is working solely for them. And we build out some, we use some technology. We use some pretty good, checklists that are intelligent sort of checklist things that we can set up, a whole preferences that, walk through. So every time we do a plan document, within there is embedded all the standards, all the, might be the advisor sort of quirks, the things that they, want specifically put into a plan, but also then all the compliance stuff. And we can work through that checklist. And that, that there's a lot that goes into that to sort of give, confidence around that's coming back as, compliant document, but we're forever having to update that as things evolve, etc. So yeah, it is I guess, whether you're outsourcing in, or whether you've got your own paraplanning, staying relevant with that is probably, now, is a key component, of what an advisor, and we see some of the firms we're working with, what we call the emergence of what we call an advice manager.
Okay.
And that advice manager is someone that, may sit across both front stage and backstage of the business. So front stage, they may, sit in the odd meeting and provide some real technical, knowledge around some things. So they're typically quite technically skilled, but they're actually then managing the compliance, the ongoing, but not necessarily writing the plans. So not a senior paraplanner, but someone that's more overseeing, then working quite closely, say with an outsourcing, system, making sure that things like, the requirements, one of the biggest challenges we have is advisors not fully understanding why the amount of stuff that's needed to produce a compliant document is needed, not understand, and so stuff is missing sort of at the start. So, that person that can filter that or educate the advisor on the importance of why this stuff is needed to produce the compliant documentations, is a sort of critical role that I think, people need to be looking at in the future.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because, again, when I had my company, it was, I'd get these new licensee expectations just get emailed to me. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, as of today, these additional things need to be looked at. And it was, for lack of a better term, for a business owner, it's really difficult to sort of just change up your process like that overnight. And it's such a difficult thing that I really feel, bad for advisors considering how much they are going through right now. And I don't know if you're sort of keeping up to date with everything, but there is, what I read last week that it's looking like advisors won't be able to charge any advice fees from super moving forward, up front and ongoing. Certainly for my super accounts, and then huge restrictions even on choice. So, I don't know what kind of eyeballs you have over the percentages of fees that are received from super, but that is almost, that's directly going after the revenue model of, I'd suggest many businesses, high percentages of businesses. And maybe while not all advice is done like that, it's certainly a substantial amount. So, man, that's going to be a huge game changer.
Yeah. We've got a lot of disruption happening. We're seeing that firsthand. People are really conscious of the cost to serve, looking at, a lot more detail. The reason we started the business was really about that working smarter, not harder, that I talked about, is that, you've got to, are we really clear on, where our value is to a client? And, can we bring down the cost so we can invest more in that relationship, in the engagement, in the stuff that they care about? Now, somewhere along the lines in the last 5-6 years, what's also happened is this big, a whole bunch of additional amount of sort of compliance, etc. But, if the way that we charge and fees, etc., is going to be fundamentally changed, that makes the value proposition, the client experience, those sorts of elements far more important to get right. I'm just reading a book called The Experienced Economy. It was written a while back, but they've just done an updated, version of that, but that's what we're in, and we need to be able to have a really cool experience, where people really look forward to coming in and spending time with their advisor. They go out energized, the experience is just, something that is valued. Then where we charge and how we charge, shouldn't matter. But it's gonna mean a lot of change, and it's gonna mean a lot of people are gonna leave the industry. And I think one of the bigger, that's a challenge. But I think the bigger challenge moving forward is for firms is where they're gonna the days of being able to recruit talent. Out of the larger institutions, these sorts of things, they're just not going to be there. So you're going to have to develop your own plans and bring people in and develop them over a number of years. And I think, that again, means you've got to have better training, better career propositions, these sorts of things. Now, this is not unusual. This is exactly how law firms work. It's exactly how accounting firms work. They bring in, people, they might have, 10 or 20 people, as graduates, and, 5 or 10 of those make it to sort of, a manager, and 1 or 2 of those make it, up to a partner over the, longer periods of time. What you talked about with compliance, I think it's, critical that's why we're going to need to see people start to get together, band together, and actually, create, larger sort of communities of advice. A business with, maybe 5 or 10 advisors, sort of in that, not just 1 or 2. I think, because you need to be able to afford to have that advice manager, that person that might be able to sit across and understand all that compliance. And I don't think we can purely just then rely on the licensees to be able to deliver all that, because that's changing quite a bit. That model, where they're really subsidised by the product that they could create or manufacture or clip the ticket on, is not going to be sustainable in the future.
Yeah. Mate, thanks for all of this. If there's an advisor out there thinking, yeah, okay, I'd like to pursue this a little bit further, how does someone reach out to you and find out more?
Probably just website's the easiest. There's a bunch of materials on there, lots of, so we've got some videos and things from clients and their experiences and those sorts of stuff. So, I think that's probably easiest. So, that's just virtualbusinesspartners.com.au. They can find out more. And also just if they want to know more about how we deliver on culture and those sorts of things, we have a separate page that's all targeted at getting talent, and there's a bunch of stuff on there. So, they can sort of go there. I mean, because for me, if I was sort of giving advice to business, financial services businesses today about what they should really look at, I think there's a really good book, a guy by the name of John Spence, called Awesomely Simple.
Cool.
But he has a formula for business, and the formula is talent plus culture plus extreme client focus, right? And you put that in brackets times execution discipline equals success. Right? And so, if I look at that, it is really, it's going to be about, how do you find the best talent?
Yeah.
How do you nurture them and those sorts of things? Great firms have great talent, and you've got to find out, well, how do you really create? How do you find those really good people? And it might be then putting them through a journey of how they come through the business and succeed and those sorts of things, not just finding someone that's external, that's been successful, but actually being able to profile those sort of people. Having a great culture, which allows them to play to their best, a good work environment, but also means that you get that extreme client focus. I often hear about firms saying that they're client centric or customer focused, but you drill that down, what does that really mean? Is every decision we're making really in the best interest of clients? How do we really engage our clients in a more meaningful way? What's really important to them? And then the execution discipline is really about just choosing 1 or 2 things to sort of focus on each quarter or each every period, and make sure that you actually get it done. They're the sort of that would be the sort of tips that I'd give to anyone. Sort of be clear on that model. Look at those sort of four or so areas.
Yep.
And that would be successful.
Awesome, man. Well, look, thank you so much. Actually, I'll just quickly ask, what's that page on your website that people can go to get the stuff?
There'll just be a link on there called careers. Is that the one and that'll go across to the sort of careers and culture page.
Yeah.
We run 2 Facebook pages. We have our again VBP careers and culture, I think it is, which is all targeted at finding talent. So, we have two sort of keys to our marketing, and it's about finding the best people, and then obviously finding clients, etc. But, we have quite a different tactic around finding best people sort of thing.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So you put almost as much effort into how to fill the pipeline of good people into your company as you do is how to find the good clients to come into your business.
Probably more.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, probably more. We'd probably put more emphasis. But, we're now a firm of, like 400 odd staff.
Yeah, okay.
So, we've got, and, we've got a lot of, demand. And, the last thing I want to do is ever, compromise the quality of the talent, because it does vary, like in anything, so you want to, create the best. We get a pretty high referral rate from existing staff, that are happy with what we're doing and how we're doing it and all those sorts of things. But, we, constantly need to be looking at, finding the best people, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, so there's a lot that we emphasize on that from a marketing point of view. And that's a lot of what the culture's about,
Sorry to interrupt. It's just really interesting you brought that up because I know that there's a handful of advisors right now that are looking to expand, and they're really struggling to find good advisors to bring into their company. And I've been sort of saying to them, look, I mean, you're spending a lot of time trying to find good clients. What effort are you doing besides spending $500 on a CCAD to find good staff? And then it's really interesting to hear you say that you're even spending more time on how to acquire good staff than you are on acquiring good clients. So it really makes a point that I guess an expanding business should really be focused kind of permanently on what they are doing for their funnel of good people to bring on.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, that, that's the thing that really differentiates, I think, those really successful businesses is if they've got, the best talent, and we define A players as sort of the top 10%, for that pay grade, if you were able to sort of, if that's what you've got, and you're not going to have 100% A players, but, if you have more, more than average, you're going to win. And, you look at the lifetime value of a client and, people can sit there and we can do some numbers, etc. But what's the lifetime value of a really good staff member or advisor? It's client times X. So, there's a thing that we talk about, which is a virtual bench. So how many people have you got on a list that are people that one day you might want to work with are you sort of nurturing that? Taking, catching up, having a coffee, chatting to them, these sorts of things. So, when people say, oh, I can't find good people, I'd go, well, if you're just doing a CCAD, that's probably not like we need to go a little bit deeper than that. You need to have a clear strategy on how we're going to sort of try to build people. Are we clear on the vision for the business? Are we clear on what we're trying to achieve? Because when you're trying to articulate, good people can work anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So they are as much interviewing you as you them. So, that's where there needs to be a lot more investment. That's where I'd be, focusing because there's plenty of good people on the move at the moment. There's plenty of disruption. So if you're a firm that's really clear on the vision, the values, what you're trying to achieve, where you want to take things, etc., and you can articulate that well, you've got a good culture, and you've got a great client value proposition, that's when you'll get some great talent coming through. But if you haven't got those pieces, well then, don't be too surprised. And I guess, that's part of why we see an outsourcing is really important. In our whole time, we've never seen any of our clients use us as a way to retrench staff. They may not, if a staff member leaves or something, they may add to our team, but it's all about freeing up good people to actually focus on the stuff, that's going to deliver value for the business and going to engage them. Because that's what really matters for, that's how you win, right? Is you got your good people. If you're paying, good people in Australian wage dollar terms to then do, lower valued work, that's you're going to be up against it. But if you can free them up to actually do the stuff that's really important, that's what's going to make a difference. One of our firms, I'll finish. I know you probably, one of our firms, the greatest thing they said to me was they have one girl that now on a Friday can ring up all their clients in the implementation phase and just tell them where they're at, what's happening, why things are stuck. We're still waiting to get the trust deed from the lawyer. We're still waiting on this information. We haven't finished with the, whatever and help manage expectation. And he said, look, it's not rocket science. It's about, but the clients just value that so much because we live in this world of where they expect everything to happen straight away, yet it might take 6 weeks to implement a piece of advice.
Yeah.
But being able to do that, and he said, we just never, that was always seen as something that we just never got to because everyone was too busy running around just trying to complete a bit of business, do whatever.
Yes. Man, that is fantastic. Dave, thanks so much for your time today, mate. Really appreciate it. And let's party in Cebu in 12 months' time.
Cool. No worries. Thanks, Clayton. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.